The slush machine began vibrating violently, as if something inside wanted out. At first, I thought it was just the compressor struggling again. The old machines at Rayner's Corner Mart always rattled when the coils iced up, especially in winter, when the cold crept in through the glass storefront and made everything hum a little louder than it should. The store was nearly empty. Just me, the low whine of the fluorescent lights, and the smell of disinfectant layered over old sugar. It was 2:17 a.m., the hour when the store seemed to hold its breath. The machine shuddered harder, plastic housing knocking softly against the counter. Blue slush rippled beneath the clear dome, though no one had touched the lever. The sound wasn't loud, exactly, more like a trapped vibration, a dense, insectal thrumming that crawled up through my shoes and into my legs. I reached out and placed my palm against the side. It was colder than it should have been. Not the clean, sharp cold of ice, but a damp chill that seeped into my skin and lingered there, numbing slowly. The vibration skipped under my hand in irregular pulses, like a heartbeat learning a new rhythm. I pulled my hand back. The machine stilled. For a few seconds, everything returned to normal. The lights buzzed. The freezer at the back kicked on. Snow slid off the awning outside with a muted scrape. I exhaled and rubbed my hands together, annoyed at myself for flinching. Then the slush machine lurched again. This time, the vibration was stronger, violent enough that the domed lid rattled in its groove. A low knocking came from inside, dull and wet, like knuckles striking plastic from the wrong side. The blue slush climbed the walls of the container, stretching upward in slow, syrupy waves before collapsing back in on itself. I stepped away from the counter. "Stop," I said quietly, because there was no one else to hear me. The knocking continued. I went behind the counter and flipped the power switch. The lights on the machine flickered, then went dark. The vibration slowed, stuttered, and didn't stop. The knocking grew louder. It took a moment for the unease to settle in. Not panic. Not yet. Just the creeping realization that the machine was still moving without power, trembling in short, frantic spasms, as if responding to something I couldn't see. I backed toward the register, eyes locked on the slush machine. The air around it looked thicker somehow, faintly warped, as if heat were rising off the plastic despite the cold that radiated from it. Frost began to bloom along the edges of the dome, spiderwebbing outward in delicate white veins. The knocking changed. It wasn't random anymore. There was a rhythm to it now, 3 short taps, a pause, then 2 slower ones. Over and over. Deliberate. Almost careful. A memory surfaced. Uninvited. My brother knocking on my bedroom door when we were kids, trying not to wake our parents. The same pattern. The same insistence. I swallowed hard. "This isn't funny," I said, louder now, my voice echoing thinly through the empty aisles. Candy wrappers shimmered under fluorescent light. Rows of energy drinks stood in rigid, silent lines, their labels smiling too brightly. The knocking stopped. For a heartbeat, I felt relief. Then the slush began to rise. It didn't splash or spill. It pressed upward in a single, cohesive mass, stretching toward the dome as if pulled by invisible strings. Shapes formed within it, long, pale distortions that twisted slowly, like fingers flexing in thick gel. The blue color deepened, darkened, bruised with shadows that shifted just out of focus. The machine vibrated so hard the counter shook. A crack split the dome. The sound was sharp and final, a gunshot echoing through the store. A thin line raced across the plastic, branching into jagged fractures. Cold air rushed out, carrying with it a smell that didn't belong, metallic and damp, like old rain trapped in a basement. Something pressed against the inside of the dome. Not a shape, not fully, just the suggestion of pressure, of weight leaning outward, testing the barrier. The plastic bowed, whining under the strain. I ran for the back room. The door stuck halfway open, swollen from humidity. I slammed my shoulder into it and stumbled inside, heart hammering so loud I was sure it would give me away. The hum of the breaker box filled the narrow space, comforting in its familiarity. I fumbled for my phone, hands slick with sweat. No signal. The knocking returned, muffled now, echoing through the walls. The metal shelves rattled in response. Dust drifted down from the ceiling with each impact. Then I heard it. A sound beneath the knocking. Soft, wet, breathing. It was slow and labored, drawn through something thick. Each inhale ended in a faint click, like ice shifting in a glass. Each exhale carried a whisper of motion, a stirring that made my skin prickle. The back room door shuddered. I pressed myself into the corner, staring at the thin gap beneath the door. Blue light leaked through, pulsing faintly with each breath. The temperature dropped sharply, my breath fogging the air in front of me. My fingers went numb. My teeth chattered, loud in the cramped space. The knocking stopped. The breathing didn't. A shadow slid across the floor, distorted and liquid, as if cast through water instead of air. Paused at the threshold. The blue glow intensified, seeping under the door in thicker bands. I squeezed my eyes shut. When the door creaked open, I didn't scream. Couldn't. The cold had stolen the sound from my throat. Something moved in the doorway. It wasn't solid. Not entirely. It flowed forward in slow, dragging motions, leaving a trail of frost and sticky blue residue that hissed softly as it touched the warmer floor. The air smelled sharply of sugar and iron. A shape coalesced, too tall, too narrow, its edges blurring and reforming. Within it, pale forms drifted, pressing against the surface as if trying to remember how limbs worked. A face surfaced briefly, stretched and wrong, mouth opening in a silent attempt at speech before dissolving back into the mass. Tilted toward me. I felt it then. Not a voice, not words, but a pressure behind my eyes. A recognition that wasn't mutual. Hunger, yes, but also confusion. Loneliness. The echo of being contained for far too long. The lights flickered. In the sudden darkness, the breathing was right beside me. When the emergency lights snapped on, the back room was empty. The door hung open, frost creeping up its edges. The air was still painfully cold, but the presence, the weight of it was gone. I slid down the wall, gasping, muscles trembling. Minutes passed, maybe more. Eventually, the store returned to its familiar hum. The fluorescence stabilized. The freezer clicked off. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on slush. I forced myself to stand and step back onto the sales floor. The slush machine sat quietly on the counter, dark and inert. The dome was intact. No cracks, no frost. The blue slush inside was smooth and perfectly still. I stared at my reflection in the curved plastic. Something moved behind my eyes. The machine vibrated softly, contentedly, as if settling back into place. And this time, when it knocked from the inside, it answered to my heartbeat. A woman entered the store crying, claiming something had followed her from the parking lot. The bell over the door rang once, sharp and brittle in the quiet, and she staggered inside like she'd been pushed. Cold air rushed in behind her, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and old snow. I looked up from the register, already forming the tired sentence about closing soon, and stopped when I saw her face. She was shaking hard enough that her coat zipper rattled. Tears streaked down her cheeks in uneven lines, cutting through mascara and road grime. Her eyes kept snapping back toward the glass doors, wide and unfocused, as if the parking lot were still right there, breathing down her neck. She tried to speak and failed. Her mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before she dragged in a breath that hitched halfway down. It followed me. I glanced past her. The lot was empty. 3 cars sat under the flickering sodium lights, their windows black. Snowbanks lined the edges like dirty teeth. Nothing moved. "Ma'am," I said gently, already reaching for the practice calm I used on drunks and panic attacks. "You're safe in here. What followed you?" She shook her head, tears spilling faster. "I don't know. I didn't see it at first. I heard it." The automatic doors slid shut behind her with a soft thump that sounded louder than it should have. She flinched at the noise and backed away from them, nearly knocking over a rack of chip bags. The store felt smaller suddenly, aisles narrowing under the buzz of fluorescent lights. Heard what? I asked. Her gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted slowly, as if afraid the answer might be hanging in the air between us. Footsteps. Too close. Not right. I watched her hands. They were red and raw, fingers clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. She smelled faintly of cigarettes and cold metal, the way people do when they've been outside too long. Okay, I said. Why don't you sit down for a second? She didn't move. It stayed just out of sight. She continued, words tumbling now, desperate to escape. Every time I turned, it stopped. I could feel it smiling. I know that sounds... She laughed once, sharp and broken. I know. The lights flickered. Just a hiccup in the power, probably. But the sudden dip made the shadows stretch and sway along the aisles. The hum returned, louder than before. I checked the time. 1:48 a.m. Did it touch you? I asked. No, she whispered. It didn't need to. She finally looked at me then. Really looked, and something in her expression cut through my skepticism. This wasn't embarrassment or exaggeration. This was the hollow, stunned look of someone who had seen something and didn't have the language to explain it. I moved around the counter, keeping my steps slow, visible. She tracked every movement. When I gestured toward the coffee station, she flinched again, as if expecting something to dart out from behind it. You can stay here, I said. Warm up. I can call someone for you. She nodded, but her eyes drifted back to the doors. The parking lot lights outside flickered in sequence, one by one, like a slow blink. It's waiting, she said. For what? I asked before I could stop myself. Her mouth trembled. For me to notice it again. A sound came from outside, a soft scrape, like a shoe dragged across concrete. I froze, halfway to the counter. She sucked in a breath so sharp it whistled. There, she said. That. I strained to hear over the buzz of the lights and the distant rumble of the coolers. The sound came again, closer to the doors this time. Slow, deliberate. It stopped directly in front of the glass. Nothing appeared. The automatic doors didn't open. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened glass, pale and stretched. For a second, I thought I saw another shape beside it, taller, indistinct, but the angle shifted and it was gone. It can't come in unless it's invited, the woman whispered. I turned to her. Invited how? By being seen, she said. By being believed. The temperature dropped. Not enough to be dramatic, just enough that the air felt heavier, colder against my skin. My breath fogged faintly. The woman hugged herself, shoulders hunching. The scraping resumed, joined now by a soft tapping. Fingertips, maybe, testing the glass. Please, she said, voice breaking. Don't look for it. I hadn't realized I was staring at the doors until she said it. The tapping grew more insistent, not loud, patient, the kind of sound that assumed time was on its side. Nothing's there, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. That's what it wants, she replied. For you to decide that. The lights flickered again, longer this time. When they stabilized, the woman gasped. Frost had begun to creep across the lower edge of the glass doors, blooming outward in thin, branching veins. The air smelled faintly of wet iron and ozone. The tapping stopped. Something shifted in the reflection. Not outside, inside the glass. A distortion, subtle but unmistakable, like a face pressed just beneath the surface of water. Features stretched and rearranged themselves, searching for familiarity. A smile formed, too wide, as if practicing. The woman screamed. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and in that instant of movement, the reflection snapped into place. Just me, pale and shaking, alone in the store. The frost vanished. The doors stood empty and still. Silence settled heavily, broken only by the woman's ragged breathing. When I turned to reassure her, the space beside the chip rack was empty. No footprints, no sound of the door, no bell, just the store humming softly and my reflection in the glass, smiling a fraction of a second before I did.